Hello, welcome again. This is Dan with the Spiritual Underground Podcast, coming to you from the studios at DTM Enterprises. The DTM is Dan the Man, and yes, that's a little corny, but that's what we call my little wood shop I have in my backyard, and which has doubled up as a podcast studio. You probably heard that if you've been listening to the podcast. Do a little commercial business real quick, spiritualunderground.org. That's where I have a website. You can see show notes for this, links to the podcast, pictures of the guests when they choose to allow me to post a picture, and an email address if you want to contact me. It's Dan at spiritualunderground.org. You can reach out to me if you want help, if you want to be on the podcast, anything you think. I'm a pretty available guy, so reach out to me if you need to do that. The music around the podcast is by Darren Frank, and you've heard him on here. We've just been using his music, and he's going to have to get, him and Jesse need to get to producing some more music, because I want some of that highly produced stuff. I got a ton of the stuff of just Darren and his guitar, and it's good too. And finally, TSSR, the 12-Step Spiritual Recovery, the book that Christopher Cohn has written, is now, as you've heard, it is out on Amazon. It's also, I think maybe this is the first time on the podcast I've announced this. It's actually out on Kindle now, so that you can get it in the Kindle format. And if you've already bought the hard copy book, they will give you a credit on your Kindle. They will discount that when you buy both. Or if you buy both together, you get a discount on the Kindle edition. So that is, once again, it's 12-Step Spiritual Recovery. James Christopher Cohn is the way it's listed on the on Amazon, and go out and get that. We've got a movement that have been having meetings for bringing the 12 steps to everybody. I have a special guest today. I have my booking agent Robin has been really helping me bring some new people in to hear some voices besides our inner circle, and I want to make sure we're doing that. And really welcome Lisa tonight to come on in the studio. We've been sitting here talking for quite a while. We had spent a little time in there playing with my pet rabbit before we could make it out to the studio here, and just really loving your energy so far. I just get a kick out of doing this. I love, I isolated when I drank. And, now it's like such a 180, because I just love to talk to people and get to know them today. This whole thing about that little thing about the opposite of addiction is connection. Mm-hmm. So I try to connect with people, and there's something that happens here at this podcast table where somebody tells, because ultimately, I feel like you're telling me, like I am the sole audience, getting to hear this. How are you tonight?
I'm good.
You can introduce you if you want to tell that we have a guest here or not.
No? Okay.
Cool. We've got a mysterious guest hanging out with us today, just helping us with the energy levels. I think the more the merrier. I like to have a few people in here. So
yes.
Way I start is it's real important to me that people have a sobriety date. My sobriety date is important to me, and it just seems to be the little thing I've done to kick this thing off. And that doesn't mean that there's one guy actually started about the time his sobriety date was. That's where his story, he circled back around and picked up some of the older story along the line. But so what is your sobriety date, Lisa?
My sobriety date is September the 19th of 2005.
2005.
And
so 14 years coming up.
Yeah. 13 and a half, I guess.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah, I was laughing when you said that, because I think I was listening to a speaker that somebody was saying they stumbled on their sobriety.
Yeah.
I think that was you. Yeah, that was talking about you always have to know your sobriety date.
Yeah,
but,
I did.
It's really just obviously just today, but yes.
Yep, you're right. It is.
Yeah.
I like to have it in here because of the range of it. I've had a couple people in there around the 1 year, just right over the 1 year mark, and then I've had, I think, my sponsor is celebrating in May 35, and Brandon was been in here. He celebrated 16 in February. So not so much as that the time is, because like you said, we only have a day at a time. But for a guy who doesn't have anything, maybe sit and listen to one of these who has on real early, see that this swath of recovery durations, that we can do it for a long time. But there's also the dynamic, like that guy that's got 35. That's just a little too much to bite off when I'm brand new, right? The guy that's just
like
got 30 days means more to me, because that is a reachable. Oh wow, that dude stayed for 30 days. Maybe I can see that. I could that 35 or even years and stuff. I remember when I was around a guy celebrating 2 years. I thought, how in the world is that happening?
And it's funny though, because I have more respect for, well, not respect, I guess I have more understanding of people that have long-term sobriety, because it's clear to me in this stage that I'm closer than I ever was to drinking. Because when I was, that first year, I just remember, it was always about those markers, that 30 days and then that 60 days and then that 90 days and then 6 months and, and then 9 months and and then that year, that wonderful. And then, so it's just, it's funny how sobriety has, I guess to say evolutionalized, I don't know how I would say it, but it's, there have been different periods of my sobriety, and that's what I think is the most interesting when I talk to people that have long-term sobriety. It's like going through stages. Yeah. Because it's not linear. You think it's linear. You think when you get sober, it's going to be this way, and it's not. The only difference is that you're not putting alcohol in.
Yeah, life is still going on. It's still happening. Life on life terms, things are still going on.
Very, very much so. And but there's not that quick fix. Yeah. So yeah. And I think, in fact, I was talking. I've had a conversation, and I'll kind of go backwards. But I had a conversation with my sponsor about this, about doing the podcast, and because I was a little apprehensive about it. And
actually, something I've started saying, because I had somebody that declined, and they first initially said they would, and they reconsidered, and they said to me, I hadn't even asked my sponsor about it yet. And I was like, well, yeah. So now, like, when I get somebody, I go, before you say yes, talk to your sponsor, please, and pray on this and make sure this is something you want to do.
Yes. And my only goal with being here, obviously I love to talk about myself, who doesn't, but to be honest, is just to maybe say something that might help somebody, even whether they're in the beginning or whatever it is, but something that they can relate to. Because I feel like, for me, sobriety 100% saved my life. And like you said earlier, it's something that, and I'll close my eyes a lot. I do that just because I forget my words a lot. But they're very important to me. But, there's so many people that are suffering from this disease and the disease of addiction that may never tell anybody about it, and it can be such a dark disease that
it's got all the shame wrapped up around it. And
yes, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's actually going to school to be she's going to go into social work, and she was actually giving me statistics behind it. And the statistics are crazy high for addiction. And we talked about, and again, I know this is probably not going to be very PC. It's not very PC when I talk about it, but it has become increasingly clear to me that with saying that I have the disease of addiction, I also have a mental illness. Yeah. And, a lot of people don't like to hear that. But for me to say that also helps me to remember that I have to treat that on a daily basis, because what I have in between my 2 ears is my biggest problem on any given day.
Right.
And, I have to be very, very careful about that. So when I was thinking about coming here today, I was listening to some of your podcasts, and I heard some people would go back to their childhood. And I kind of really thought about this because, over the years, I've given leads, and I've told my story, and sometimes I skirt the issue, sometimes I don't, sometimes I try to say it in the best way that I can. But I can tell you that what happened to me as a child 100% formed me, but it didn't make me an alcoholic. And my parents my parents were together, and I was born very early. I was born prematurely. I was only like 3 pounds. And of course that was, 51 years ago. So that was pretty unusual. And, they had to put me in an incubator for several months because, I couldn't come out of the hospital. So when I finally did come home, my mother, though she's never been diagnosed, she clearly has suffered from a major mental illness as well. But by the time I got home, she, and just to give you some background on her, she had some really bad things happen in her life. I firmly believe that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
I believe that with all my heart. And by the time I got home, she was full of rage. And when I was about 5 months old, my dad came home and found one of my legs was hanging off of my body in a weird manner. He came home from work, and he was a traveling salesman, so he would be gone for the weekends and so on and so forth. And he came home, and I was crying uncontrollably. So they took me to the hospital, and they found out through an x-ray that every single one of my bones in my body had either been broken or was in the stage of healing.
Oh my. And
what they found out was that my mom, in order to hush me up, she would throw me up against the wall. This was a neighbor that told my dad this. And I didn't learn about any of this until much, much, much later in my life. But I say that, and then, of course, when I went to the hospital, they took me into Child Protective Services. And, of course, this was 51 years ago. So they locked my mom up, and then they went through this process. I went into an orphanage for a period of time, and then they asked my dad, and my dad's such a good person, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but he's such a wonderful heart. But they asked my dad, what do you want to do? And my mom, of course, professed that she was very sorry, and she would never do it again. And they asked my dad what he wanted to do, and my dad said, can you release her to my custody, and I'll make sure that she's okay. And they did. And then my mom, professed her love and said that she would, do right, and she was terribly sorry. And my dad just wanted to keep the family together, so he they reunited, and I went back into the home. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that the abuse never stopped, but she never broke another bone. But it never ever stopped. It was my brother likened it one time to being in a concentration camp, because it was never any day. I mean, it wouldn't matter. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I did or I didn't do. It was, but to be fair, my mom had to take care of her 2 little sisters when she was 5 years old. They were 5, 4, and 3, and they were abandoned by their parents. So I believe that having a little girl in her life, it just brought up all of that, and she just couldn't do it.
Yeah, we
and
know
she
that
tried.
That's not in like the nature of people. This is a damage thing. This is something that where our spirit got stepped on, and we learned to have to grant people spiritual sickness. That's what in our hearts. That's not who we are.
That's right.
We don't do those things. But when you had your spirit stepped on, like you said, hurt people can hurt people.
That's right. And she
amazing.
Did the best that But I can tell you that my mom and dad got divorced, and then my mom remarried, and she really tried. She tried to give us a good life. I was put into Catholic school. I was given a lot of really wonderful opportunities. And that's how I'll tell you that I know that I suffered from a mental illness, because none of that ever really mattered to me. But I didn't know any of that at the time. I was on the swim team. We were, as normal could be, I guess, because meanwhile, she's in a very abusive marriage, and then, she's getting beat. She's beating me, and, my brother's kind of on the outside, and he's kind of like.
Is it just you and your brother?
Yeah. So he's kind of the safe, he never was the recipient of it. because, like I said, I think it just was a female thing for her. My mom is still alive, but I don't speak with her anymore. That was a conscious decision, and I've talked to my sponsor about it. But I'll get into that too. And that was through a lot of work. And I very highly, in fact, I think everybody that I work with in the program, as far as sponsorship, we do. I highly recommend outside help, because AA is not. AA is meant for one thing and one thing only, and I believe in outside help. I believe in getting the help that you need through the right sources, because you can get all kinds of things in AA, but you have to be very careful.
To do that.
Yes.
Page 132.
I don't know that. I didn't know that. I probably will never be
God
a big book toter.
I have I'd have told you a long time ago that my memory wasn't good and I can't remember names and all that, but that was all bullshit, because I remember a great deal of things today, that I never thought I would. But the part in there that says that you need to use these people, these practitioners of various kinds,
That's
to
right.
help us during or before and after our cases, so.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, somebody says that AA is enough and you don't need anything else, so the book says different.
Oh, very, very, very. I don't think AA can. I don't think that people that have had the amazing lives that we have now, I don't think could have been done all alone. I mean, it's clear.
My sponsor is a counselor at the same time, so I got this little double whammy thing going
nice.
on. He's primarily a CD counselor, but he's got a lot of knowledge to pass on to me that's helped beyond what maybe I'm able to deliver for being an engineer.
Yeah, and that's what my counselor, he's dealt with quite a few people. I mean, he knows addiction very well, and he knows the 12 steps, and we'll go back and forth on them.
Cool.
But he understands why I'm so devoted to them, because there's sometimes where he'll say, well, what don't you think? But then, it's just, for me, having that extra added layer of somebody that has been to school and understands, human psychology, kind of makes sense as to why we do what we do. So, but the, like I said, it was a pretty normal, for what it could be, normal childhood.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I had to stop for a second because, but that is what we do, right? We will say that was normal.
Holy shit. I remember, in fact, when I said that, I thought, the only time it was ever really normal is when we got to go, or we would go out of town, or we would go to a hotel, and, that was when my mom would want to escape her husband. We would go and stay at a hotel, and still to this day, I love the smell of chlorine, because that's how I associated I was safe. Like when we would go to these hotels. So I love it's bizarre. Bleach, it's just very bizarre. But I
think that since the smell is an unreal thing, how you will associate smells with things that will bring back feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number
it was
of
like it's like a sense of
security.
security. Like I know the kids they probably thought I was nuts because I was cleaning all the time.
To get that funny too.
Yeah, but I like the smell of chlorine.
Yeah, some people burn incense and candles. I clean.
Yeah, bleach, and it is.
It's
but it's comforting.
I totally get that.
And I don't think I've ever put the two and two together until just now. But
the thing that you said normal, it becomes normal for us. That was my normal life. That was your normal life.
It was how I survived. No, it was how I survived. It was survival. It really was. And I heard you. I think that's so interesting because I heard somebody on one of your podcasts say, well, as an alcoholic, I remember my first drink, and people that are not alcoholic, they would never. And I think that's so funny because it's so very true. I do. I remember it. I was like 8 years old, and it was just a company. Not a company. It was a family Christmas party, and I remember it. I remember the way that it made me feel. I remember it very vividly. But it was. I was 8, and I had whatever, a glass of wine, and then that was it. It didn't occur to me again. But I did know that, the time that I was growing up, like I said, I went to a parochial school, so, my parents provided very well. Now, my dad was off and on in the picture, but not really. He was more off than he was on, and I'll explain why later. But
your mom had remarried.
Yes, she had remarried, and he was kind of in and out. We would go and visit I called him the Chevy Chase of fathers, because all he wanted us to do when we saw him is to have fun. He would take us to amusement parks, to the ocean. He only just wanted us to laugh. He wanted us to have fun, and he was good at that. He made it a good time. But while I was going to this parochial school and learning all about religion, and the whole time, I can tell you, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. I certainly, I can remember bits and pieces. Obviously, I don't remember the abuse, which when I was talking to my therapist and my sponsor the other day, it dawned on me that I was given a gift in not being able to remember the abuse, because I don't know that I would be alive today if I did.
Yeah.
I believe that I would have suffered from self-pity. I really do. I believe I would have ultimately just ended up killing myself accidentally from self-pity. Because if you went through what I did, then you would be doing this too.
Yeah.
And my body remembers, but I don't. And I think that was a blessing in a very large way. But while I was in school, I remember it was a pretty small school. It was over there off of Hikes Lane, and wasn't a lot of families there. It was during the time there was still a lot of segregation, here in Louisville, and they, I remember looking at all the other little girls and thinking that they've got something that I don't have, and I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I was different. I didn't know what it was. I just knew I didn't fit in, and I tried. I tried to the best of my ability, but I just didn't know what I was missing. I couldn't figure it out. I just knew that it wasn't really clicking. I had some friends, I had some girlfriends, but they weren't really close. I just felt like an oddball. And I can tell you that the summer between my 8th grade year and my 9th grade year was a pivotal summer. I was 13 years old. Of course, my birthday's in October, so I was always early. So between that 12th and 13th birthday, I was gonna go on to a parochial high school, and I thought I was all grown up, and I found boys, and I found alcohol, and I found drugs in the same summer, almost all on the same night. And it was, I can tell you that pretty much from the get-go, when I drank to blackout. I can tell you that I was 12 and 13 years old, and that was literally my pastime, was going to find, where were we going to go drink that night, or where were we going to go that weekend, or who was I going to be able to hook up with, or what was I going to be able to do. That was all that I could think about. It was
think about how young we were too. Did you say between the 8th and 9th grade?
Yes.
It's about the same time I made my transition too.
Yeah, and I was in a big fat hurry to grow up. I was in a big fat hurry. And the other thing that I can tell you is that, it was right around that time that I had this penchant for running away. There was nothing I could do in my household, but I could change it. So I would run away. And I would stay gone. It was crazy. I still have dreams about it, but I would stay gone, and I would befriend these girls that would be up the street, and their mothers would feel sorry. I was great at manipulating.
You would stay with somebody.
Yeah, I'd get their moms to open their doors and let me stay with them, and I'd be staying right down the street from where my mom was, and as many things as I could say. I mean, she really, she was worried. I mean, it was horrible what the family had to go through. Because, when I stayed gone, I would stay gone for long periods of time. And I was partying hard during that time, as much as I could. I did finish. I did not. I actually, at the parochial school, 9th grade, from 9th to 10th grade, I flunked out. I flunked out on the easiest thing ever. It's so funny because I hear people tell this part in their story as well, but it was like study skills. It was like, you flunking art, how do you do that? Flunking PE. But I decided I didn't want to write a paper. So I didn't, and my mom said, we're not going to pay for you to go on to parochial high school. We're going to put you at Seneca. And I said, that's perfectly fine with me. And, I thought I was going to have it made there because assumption I shouldn't have said that, but I would literally, my whole plan when I would get to school was when I could leave. I hung out with the girls that partied just like I did, and we would go hang out at a gas station and sit in the gas station all day long and smoke cigarettes. That was the big thing. I remember learning how to smoke a cigarette, thinking I was really tough.
Nicotine was my first drug.
Oh, I remember, I still like I said, I don't have many memories, but I vividly remember teaching myself in front of a mirror how to inhale a cigarette so I could look cool.
So you could look cool doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ain't that a trip?
Yes. So I
see people smoking and I think, do you know how dumb you look? I don't care how cool you might think you look.
I can tell you that I have been smoke-free for, I don't know, 8-10 years?
Really?
Maybe
Awesome.
even longer?
Yeah, it's tough.
But I can tell you that there are times where I smell a cigarette and it still comes back to me.
I've been off nicotine I actually keep track of the days because of the way I quit. We trade day counts. And I thought it was a little funny at first, but it really comes down to just like what we have here. We just got a day.
Yeah.
So day at a time, I do that. So I know I'm 547 days off of nicotine. Dang. I primarily dipped.
Yeah.
Which like when most people go, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know to the day, which that's just shy of October will make 2 years. So it's a year and a half or something off of nicotine, and it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
it is.
And smoking is just, both of them get you though. And coming off of nicotine was, for this guy, was every bit as an imbalance in my psychological state as coming off of the alcohol and the drugs. I did some really weird stuff coming off of nicotine that are totally outside of my character. Some rage stuff. And I'm not that guy most of the time.
I understand. It's that thin veil. Yes, I understand that.
So yeah, you've been off cigarettes long enough. You don't even remember how long it's been exactly.
No, I can't remember. I remember that at the very end, I had tried to quit smoking, and I just didn't. That is one of those things with drinking, and I'll get to that. But drinking, I had a huge aha moment in my life. But smoking was not so much because it was so much more socially acceptable, I guess. And back to that 13 to 16 time frame in my life, when I was running away and causing as much havoc as I possibly could. I was pretty hard on my family, and my mom had divorced the gentleman that she had been married to, and she got remarried, and this guy suffered from the disease of alcoholism, and so he brought in actually this was the fourth. We had one in the middle, one in there that wasn't worth noting. Yeah, I think that's how she met the fourth. But anyway, but he brought in the disease of alcoholism, and he brought in the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh yeah.
So because she met him through a treatment center or something. I don't remember the full story, but the thing is that even at that young age, I was introduced to Alateen. Mm. So I remember being a teenager and chairing Alateen meetings, but then I'd leave there and go get way messed up. I mean, it was absolutely. I remember that very, very vividly.
Did it compute at all, or
no? Never even.
Yeah.
No, it was like he's an alcoholic. There's no way I am. And when you said that to me earlier, you said I knew I was an alcoholic, and I mean, I can tell you with every fiber of my being, I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know. This is rear view mirror knowing.
Yeah.
Now I see back. Yeah. At the time, yeah. No.
I had, not even a clue. So when I was 16, I was encouraged to get a job as soon as possible, and I did. And I found the restaurant business, and boy, did I found my family. Oh, I found my family, and I found people that drank and smoked and partied just like I did, and I loved it. And I barely graduated. I graduated. I
like that term.
Yeah, barely. Yeah, I graduated when I was 17. So I graduated early, and then I had a full grant, and I don't usually talk about that, but I had a full grant to U of L. Full grant. Couldn't make it to class. It was too important to me to go. I would literally go down to U of L, and then I would take a bus back over to like the Highlands area and hang out with one of my friends and sit on his porch and smoke cigarettes and smoke pot. I mean, it was a blip in my radar, the fact that I was not going to school. And
you handed this gift, and I think there's a little bit of something with that like not having any skin in the game in a way.
Yes.
Made it not worth something,
It didn't even register to me what I was throwing away. I would give my eye teeth to have a college degree. Yeah. I've been back a couple times, but never graduated.
Yeah, I checked some college box.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Some classes. I mean, mine have been life classes. I mean, that's one of my goals, to one day have a college degree. But, and during that time, I was 17, and I had to go to my mom, and I told her that I had quit college, that I'd flunked out, and that I was moving out. I couldn't wait to move out. I hear kids talk about, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be something, when they grow up. And all I knew that is, I just wanted to grow up. That was all I wanted to do. I didn't have any aspirations. I just wanted to grow up. I never really thought about long term. I still don't. Really, I kind of walk through life. Sometimes
I do the day at a time thing to the point that it bothers a lot of the people around me. What are you doing tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I talk to my dad, and he'll be like, "Well, that holiday's in 2 weeks." I'm like, "Dad, don't do that because
way too far out."
Yes, this is just today. And I still do that a whole lot. I walk around with I kind of did that with the steps, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because if I'd known what was in front of me,
it's a blessing there. We tell people, right? Stay in the step you're on.
Yeah, I mean, stay right where, and it's hard to remember that.
Make amends on. You're not making amends.
Yeah, you just got to remember right where you are right at that time, and it's hard, but
we get trained with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that everybody needs this, but there's a real global philosophy of stay in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Live where your feet are at.
Yes, I believe that, and I believe that as a society, we're kind of geared not to do that. It's very. I mean, it's a mind. It's very hard to do, but it's also, for me, it's a kind of a safety mechanism. Because the truth is I can't, sponsees will say, well, they know that this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and I'll tease them, and I'll say, well, if you know that's going to happen, then I think we should go ahead and go buy a lottery ticket, because that means the winning numbers for tonight, and we're going to win. Because I don't know what's going to happen in the next minute.
Yeah.
And, so, but, like I said, I found the restaurant business when I was 19 or 20. I found fine dining. I graduated and went into bartending, and that's that was my bestest friend. And I during that time I was still suffering. Well, I should say when I was 21, I had this wake up moment. And if anybody hears this story and they're right around this age, maybe you can hear this, but I was 21, partying like it's nobody's business. I was out living out on my own. I had my own apartment by this time, and I had an accident where I had injured my hand, and I had injured it badly enough that I think I had to go to the hospital, but I know I had to tell my parents. And this was my stepdad that was in AA, and then my mom. So, they kind of looked at this and they said, looks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, might be a duck. So they said, maybe you should think about going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm 21 years old. How would I ever have a problem? But I can tell you that my stepdad from that was the year of 92. He gave me a big book. I still have that big book. That's the only one I have. And they wrote in there. They wrote, we hope you find the happiness that you're looking for. And my mom, she, as many things as I could say negative about her, she would say to me everything. I mean, she is a wonderful person. She really is. She just, had a mental thing. But she would say to me, everything you need, Lisa, is right inside of you.
Yeah.
And, because I was always looking outside to find it every time. And so I was bartending, and I had this fatal accident with my hand. Not fatal, but I had to go and get it looked at. And my stepdad took me to an AA meeting, and I was at the Token Club, and it was at the time that they could still smoke up there, and it was the most foreign thing that I'd ever been in. And I mean, talk about, there was no way to identify. I looked around the rooms. I shut down completely, ran out of there as fast as I could. But the one thing I'll tell you is that big book that I had, I moved probably 8-9 times. Every time I moved, I brought that big book with me. It wasn't even a question. Do I take it? Do I leave it? I brought it.
Wow.
Didn't know why. Had no idea.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I had nothing. I didn't even understand. But so
it's a little like I will put little funny things in my head. It's like it's tied on a thread. You can't drop it. Everywhere you go, there it is. It's still coming with me.
Yeah.
I don't really know, but
the weirdest
there
things.
It is. I moved to here, moved to there, and there that thing is. That could be like a movie thing where you look over and you're like, how'd that get here?
It was weird, though, because it was just like it was always there, but I never really paid attention to it.
Yeah.
I didn't open it. God forbid. But
it knew you were going to need it someday.
Well, and that's what I call dipping your toe in, because I see so many people come in and dip their toe in, and I'm so grateful for that, because that's what it takes sometimes to know that it's, the program is there when you need it.
Yeah.
It's called, just to know that, just to have that comfort that it is there. And that's what I did. I dipped my toe in, and I left there, and I tried to continue on with my life, and still looking for that answer, just looking for something to make me whole. Something's going to make me whole. And I thought that, obviously I thought that a man was going to make me whole. I thought a relationship would make me whole. And I met my children's dad. And I obviously, I always did everything backwards, but I got pregnant first with my son, and then I got married. And I thought for sure that marriage was going to make me whole. I thought we were going to, I thought we were going to be the Cleavers. And, he married me. And, I mean, I can tell you nothing but wonderful things about that man, because he did a very selfless act. He married me. We had my son. And, I think we tried to convince each other, ourselves, more than anything, that we were in love. But I don't know that really was part of the equation. I knew that we were doing the best that we could, and we were going to try to make a normal life. And not long after my son was born, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So I had 2 children. They were 14 months apart, and then my husband at the time, and he worked a very, very hard job. He worked long hours. He was great at supporting the family. And at one point, we had decided that maybe it was time for me to go back to work. And he gave me this wonderful blessing of being home with my children for about 2 years. So I got to spend some, the very early childhood I got to spend with them. Yeah, and it was nice because I got to be with my daughter, and, I got to be with my son, and we had a quote unquote normal life. But I can tell you, and again, this is going to be very controversial, but I can tell you, and I heard somebody on your podcast that said that they had stopped drinking when they were pregnant. I can tell you that I didn't. I remember my son coming, not my son, I remember my husband would come home from work, and we would go and we would lock ourselves in the bathroom, and I would smoke a cigarette, and I would have a glass of wine maybe. But, I just remember that was my treat. It was always that way. It's always been that way. How are you going to get your pleasure, your satisfaction? And
your fix.
Yeah, my fix. That's right. Yeah, that's right. What I've come to find out is that I'll probably always need that fix. I can get it in different ways. I can get it in, through the steps. I can get it through a higher power. I can get it, most of all, I can get it by getting outside of myself.
Yep.
That's the best. That's the best fix that I've had so far. And that's the one that I've found to be the most rewarding, but it's also the most permanent, because sugar just makes me fat.
Yeah.
But I still love it. But we had those 2 kiddos and my husband at the time, and we decided that I was going to go back to work. So what did I know how to do? But I knew how to bartend. So I would go to work. I worked in a very small restaurant, and he would come home at night, and then when he came home, I would leave. So I would go and bartend, and I would sit up after work. That was my thing. I would sit up with the girls after work and have a couple glasses of wine. Never even dawned on me that there was an issue. And then, meanwhile, he would be home taking care of the kids. He was a good dad. And but our marriage was doomed to fail. I believe that with all of my heart. We were married, I think, almost 5 years. Well, we got married in 93, and I think, no, we didn't even make it 5 years, because I remember the year 97 was probably one of the hardest years I'd ever lived through. And the kids were so young. They were 3 and 4. But during that time, I'd also found a restaurant that allowed me to be a day bartender. And that restaurant was so good to me. And the patrons that came into that restaurant were so good to me. My kids pretty much grew up in that restaurant.
Really?
And the patron, it was a local restaurant. It was, it was family owned. It was very small. And I was paid very well. And their dad had, he provided support, but we were allowed a pretty nice life. I found a nice home where they could go into, a nice school, or we could stay in the district. It wasn't, it was just, but it was a good school system, and I tried to make things as normal as possible. But I can tell you that during that time, my favorite thing to do was, I always called it, I would sweep everything up into a pile. So like everything in my life would go in 2-week increments, because every other weekend was when they would go to see their dad. And I would say a lot that I would say I only drank when my kids were gone. And I remember saying that one time in front of my son or my daughter, and they looked at me and they said, no, you drank every night. Then I think, there was a point in my life where Miller Lite and Marlboro Lights were my very best friend, because I would come home and I would always have a Miller Lite. Always.
So I was primarily a beer drinker, and I'd put away a lot of Miller Lite.
And Marlboro Lights. I would go to the bathroom, and I would take a bath, and I would have a couple beers, and then everything would be leveled out. And but when the kids would go away on the weekends, it was the same thing. It was just like playing a tape. It was like the same thing I mean, definition of insanity. It was crazy. Well, this went on for 18 years. Same thing. Friday night, always the same thing. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a dinner with my girlfriends. Or if I was dating somebody, we were going to go out and have dinner. And, by 8 o'clock, I usually didn't know my name. I mean, my goal from the time that I started drinking was to black out. I wanted to get to the point where I could shut my brain down, and that's what I did. I didn't get a driver's license until I was 21 or 22, and that was only because I was pregnant and I had to drive. I didn't want to drive because I knew it was too much responsibility. I didn't want to get in trouble drinking and driving. I took the TARC bus wherever I went because my goal was to stay as pretty much as inebriated as possible. Yeah.
And we introduced some responsibility in our lives around some of that stuff. That's real interesting. Probably kind of pat yourself on the back about it too. I don't drive.
Oh yeah, I thought that was cool.
I'm a hero.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I mean, I would work in this fine dining restaurant. We would get off work and what were you going to do? At 2 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night, what were you going to do? You couldn't go home. So, we just sit there and drink until 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. But, that was early on. But then when the kids came along, then my drinking, it was always the same. And by 8 o'clock, on that Friday night, it would be crazy. And, 4 o'clock the next morning, it would be like, who's that and where am I and what the hell, what happened? And what am I going to do now? And then the next morning, God, that's one of the things that I related to very, very in the very beginning was the 4 horsemen, terror, bewilderment, and frustration. That was what it was. The whole weekend would be spent that way because Saturday would be spent trying to put the pieces back together and make myself feel better because God, those hangovers. And then Sunday would be spent trying to make everything look perfect again. It was always that outside image that I was so worried about. I thought if it all looked okay on the outside, then nobody was going to look on the inside. And
that's interesting. I feel the same, but I never put it in that way that I purposely was packaging that.
Yeah. That's how I lived my life for 18 years. 18 years. And then the spring of 2005, that restaurant that I worked for finally closed down. The 2 partners got in a huge fight and they shut the restaurant down. It was a complete blow to me, even though, it was probably time to move on. And I had broken up with the guy that I'd been dating. I thought we were going to get married, and that was not the case. And in the spring of 2005, I had an intuition, and I still remember that. I don't remember a lot, but I remember that I had an intuition that it was going to end badly. I knew something was going to end really badly, but I didn't know what. I couldn't put my finger on it. And I found another job. It was, working in the same profession as a bartender. And the thing that I would always do is I would serve these. I had a wonderful following, and they would come in daily, and I would think they have a problem. They have a problem. Yeah. They're alcohol. I don't know that I put the word alcoholic on that, but I knew that I was different than them.
These people here are.
This is the true alcoholic. But they didn't know that what I would do is when I would go home. Yeah. I would go home and just get, yeah. And when it started.
See ourselves, man. You just can't see yourself.
No, but everybody
still
else
can't,
did.
Really?
Everybody
I still need help
did.
seeing me.
Oh my gosh. Well, when the kid's dad and I, we had a horrible, horrible custody battle for many, many years. And I remember one of the last times he took me to court, he had like 24 reasons of why he wanted custody. And the very first reason on there was she's an alcoholic. And that was the most foreign thing. He could have said, she's
from Mars.
Yeah. He could have said that she has 4 ears. And I'd have been like, what in the hell is he talking about? Well, how does he know that? Well, he knows that because he spent the time with my children. They were the ones, they would go home. He was just speaking the truth. But I had no idea. None. And anyway, that was about 4 years before I got sober. That last custody battle, and that worked. I mean, it worked out the way that it did. But the spring of 2005, and then the date that was September the 18th. It was a Sunday, and I think that something had happened with the visitation, so the kids weren't coming home until Monday evening. And one of my friends from the restaurant that I worked at, we started out at a local bar right around the corner. No, we started out in my backyard, and then we went on to the local bar. And I still have bits and pieces in my head of what happened, just tiny bits and pieces, because I was clearly, I think I was blacked out by early evening. And just doing absolutely insane things. And I was told that I left that bar that night with two men that I didn't know. But what I remember was coming to on the backside of my neighborhood. And when I came to, I looked up, and there was a car in front. There was a truck in front of me, and I had hit that truck head on. But when I came to, that was literally that last impact that jolted me out of that blackout. And I thought, because the car was facing the wrong way on that road, and what that truck did was he had stopped me from going out onto Hurstburn Lane. But when I came to, I thought that he had hit me. And what I came to find out is that I left that local bar, which was maybe 2 or 3 blocks from my house, and I drove home in a complete blackout. And I came down the backside of my neighborhood, and I hit 4 parked cars, and hit them like an 8-ball. Pinged off one and then went on to another. And I drive down that street every day now, and I think about that. And there's a speed limit sign, and they said I was probably doing 40, and it's a 25. Mm-hmm. And there was a little dogwood tree, and I remember that tree was there forever. And I don't think that there were any coincidences in my life. But when I came to after hitting that last car, I had no idea what happened. There was blood all over the car. The airbag had gone off, and I got out of the car, and there was blood all over me. I didn't have my shoes on. First responders were there, and I didn't know if I had a passenger. I had no idea. I had no idea what happened. And they put me in the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, because what I found out was I didn't have my seatbelt on, so my body actually launched across the car, and I did something crazy on my. I still have a scar on my scalp, so I can always remember it. I see it right in front of me every single day. But I hit the armrest or something, so I had to go and get stitches. And when I was in the hospital, they came in and they did a blood alcohol level on me. And for my size, I was very small, very petite. I think it was like a 0.28 or something like that. It was lethal for where I was. And they figured out that I had actually built my tolerance up to this stage. But I remember being in the hospital, and there was one thing that I remember very, very clearly. Of course, I was crying, feeling sorry for myself. How was I, what was I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, the car was totaled. And I remember the ER nurse, she came over to me, and because I was so full of shame, and she grabbed my hand, and she looked at me, and she said, "Honey, I want you to know something." And I'll never forget her for saying this. She said, "I want you to know that you are not a bad person. You're a sick person." And I had no idea what the hell she was saying, but I'll never forget her for saying that. And what I can tell you is that I left that hospital, and I had, in between all of this time of having children and getting married and getting a divorce, and all my life I was still seeking the answer. I had tried church. I tried every denomination I could think of. The only church, I'd never been in a synagogue, but I was kind of thinking about
It's
it.
on the list.
Yeah, if I could have gone. But, I mean, I went to every faith there was. I remember I dated a guy that was very deep into the Baptist faith, and I thought, this is going to be it for me. But I could never quite find it, because I still had that Catholic upbringing of what I thought was my religion.
That was your roots, was Catholic?
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very staunch
That's
Catholic.
pretty typical around here.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. And my grandparents, my grandfather was, he was very. He and the Pope would have been very good friends. he was a good Catholic. He was I should say that my mother was adopted. I should have said that very early on. My mother was adopted, her and her two sisters, after they got out of that horrible, where my mom was actually abandoned when she was 5 years old by her parents. But she was later on adopted by my grandparents. My grandparents are just absolutely wonderful people. They were older, and they knew what they wanted in their lives, and they adopted these 3 girls and, tried to make a normal life for them. But my grandfather was very, very, very much into his religion. I mean, I can't say anything negative about my grandfather. He's just a wonderful person. But, so he brought into our lives the Catholic religion, and that's how we grew up. And I went.
You said you went to Catholic school.
Yes, I went to Catholic school, and I remember we would have to go to mass. Oh, I remember it. Or we'd have to go to mass, twice a week. And I remember clearly many times. I would think the people that were sitting next to me in the pew, and the kids that I was going to church with, or the adults or whoever, I just would always think that they were the normal people. That the people that were outside, mowing their lawns on a Sunday afternoon, they were the normal people. I knew that I was just something from outer space.
Something's wrong with me.
I knew. I mean, it was just not, I knew. So I spent all this time, and I actually had started going to therapy when I was in my 20s, but I was never, ever, I used to get pissed when I'd go to a therapist or to a new doctor, and they would ask you, how many alcohol drinks do you?
Yeah, right.
How much do you drink? And I'd be like, whose business is that? Yeah. How much do you smoke? What do you care? Yeah. I was never honest with that and I was never honest with my therapist about my drinking ever.
Yeah.
So I never really got the help that I needed, because if I had been, then obviously this would be way different.
Yeah, it's interesting that people get, we get diagnosed and get prescribed and all this kind of things for whatever, doctors are doing the best they can, but we're not telling them the truth, so you don't tell them that you're drinking a quart of depressant a day,
That's exactly right. I would go into the doctor and I'd be like,
depressed.
They're going to tell me I have, this deadly disease, and I would walk away and they tell me you have IBS. And I would get so angry. Like, I know I have more than IBS. I know I have more than IBS. And, the truth is my insides were rotting out. I mean, I was drinking myself to the, I firmly believe, and I mean, this wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I'd gotten a hold of the Joe and Charlie tapes, mm-hmm. and where they talk about what happens in the body of an alcoholic versus the body of an alcoholic. And I direct people to that, because I think it's very important to know physiologically what happens to the body, what happens to our livers, what happens to our pancreas that's different than the body of a non-alcoholic, because it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yep. And it really lands for a lot of people.
Yes. It does, because there's things, it goes back to that. I remember when I first got sober, and just like everybody else, people would say, it's just control. It's just control. It's just control. What they didn't know is that once I started, I was not going to stop. I knew that. And I would tell myself, you're going to stop. You're going to stop. You're going to have one beer and you're going to stop.
Yep.
But I didn't. Yeah. I knew I wouldn't.
Well, and I've said that on here before, I think, but there's two distinct differences in like the insanity of the first drink to me. There was that one back when I didn't really know that that's really what it was doing. Although I did know that once, I needed to like clear my calendar kind of thing, mm-hmm. That once I started, but I didn't really get the real point of it. And then I came into AA and I got some, how we say, it messes up your drinking or whatever, get a belly full of or a hip full of AA and a belly full of beer. But that was really where the insanity really, I remember, because I remember staring at like the empty can is closed, and knowing at this point, y'all taught me that when I open this up, then, that's going to spin the top, and we don't know where the top is going to stop. And that was when the insanity of the first drink really got scary, when I would sit there and go, okay, and then pop that first one, knowing that I didn't know where it was going to take me. That's spooky stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me that I remember listening to a speaker tape, and he I don't know if it was I can't even remember. I want to say it was Bill or Dr. Bob, or one of them was talking about the beer actually, talking to them from down in the cellar. And I mean, I can so understand that.
Yep. I just went through that with a friend who drank just within weeks of his 1 year anniversary. I talked about it on the podcast the other day on that one I did just on a monologue, and to me that's what happened. He had that out in the garage.
Yeah.
And it's out there going, hey,
yeah,
I'm in here.
Yeah.
Don't forget about me.
Yeah.
Don't forget about me. Yeah, that stuff talks to me too.
Yeah.
I hear pills rattle in somebody's purse that talks to me.
Yeah.
I didn't heard any drugs in your story?
I was, besides smoking grass. Yeah, no, I was recreational drug use, but I can tell you that, it was only by the grace of God, because when I was drinking, I would do, it's just by the grace of God that I'm not a heroin addict, because I would have done it. I'd have done it. I'd have done it. I didn't care. You got it, I'll take it.
Yeah.
It was just that was not in front of me. It was just purely by the grace of God. Alcohol was my drug of choice, I guess. But anything that would take me away from me, I would do it. So it didn't really matter. Alcoholism was what I identify with, but more than anything, it's addiction. And, it's mental illness. And that's where I had to be very clear. So what I was, after my DUI, I was very clear that something had to change, and this was within days of itself. My brother I finally told my family what was going on, and they said, what are you going to do differently? And I still remember cringing inside, like, fuck you. What do you mean? What am I going to do differently?
What kind of question is that?
So, this only thing that I can say is it had to have been a divine intervention, because I knew about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I picked up the phone and called central office. And this was a Tuesday night, and I have to say this because it's very important to my sobriety. But that was a Tuesday night, and they said on the phone, you're in luck. There's a meeting on Wednesday morning, and it's a women's meeting. And it's at the Token Club, the Token 3 Club over on Dutchman's Lane. And I'd already been there when I was 21, so I knew where that was. And I trudged up the stairs, and my face was all busted up from that DUI. And I looked like a newcomer. And I still remember sitting down, because if I had gone to a meeting that had been a mixed meeting, I probably wouldn't have stayed. I probably would have manipulated my way out of it, and I probably wouldn't have stayed. But I can tell you, when I sat down in that chair and I started listening to those women that were sharing, and of course I was crying the whole time, but I heard those women say things. I grew up in a Catholic school, and, we didn't have gym, and I didn't really get to know I never really knew other women. Or at least they didn't talk like this. That's what I knew. And I heard women saying things that were inside of my head and in my heart that I'd never heard other women talk or girls talk about. So I knew that this had to be it. This is what I was looking for. I didn't know what it was, but it started to make sense. And I say this a lot, but it's very true. If I'd heard the word God, probably within the first month, I probably would have ran, because I wasn't ready to embrace anything close to spirituality or religion or anything like that, because I'd already brought my own baggage along with me, as so many of us do. Mm-hmm. But I remember very distinctly after that meeting, 2 women came up to me, and they grabbed me and they hugged me, and one of them gave me their number, and they said, "We hope you keep coming back." And they said, they gave me very clear directions: find yourself a sponsor, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I didn't know what else to do. So that's what I did. And it was, I found a sponsor. She was a good friend of mine, which I found out that's why you don't get sponsors that are friends. Because that didn't work out very well at all, and I had to get a new sponsor. And I have a great story about my fifth step with my sponsor at the time, and how I had to become very comfortable with telling my truth to a number of women. And it was very healing for me, actually, to be able to be that vulnerable with other women, because there was a point in my life where, and I won't tell it on this podcast, but there are some things in my life that I'll be very clear with you. I cannot judge anyone. I cannot judge anyone because, I don't know I don't know if there is a hell or a heaven. But I don't know that I'm going to heaven. I don't know that. I don't know that there is that. But I do know that there are things that I will never, ever, ever be able to make whole. So I hope to spend the rest of my life trying to do so. And that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me. But that wasn't my initial thought. My initial thought was, I was tired. I'd spent my whole life running. My kids, their entire childhood, I was always irritable. If we were doing something, it was, when was this going to be over so I could go do what I wanted to do?
I can relate to that.
I was always irritable. I was never, ever present. I loved them to the best of my ability. I really did. I loved being with their energy. I loved them. But that alcohol, somebody told me early on in the meeting, I heard somebody say alcohol had become my master. And it was very clear to me that alcohol, from the get-go was it was like a calling from down deep inside my soul. And it was always there. So nobody could supersede that. Nobody. And I had no idea. And when you talked about that, I think that's what scares me the most, is that I could be that far into denial about alcoholism. So that also makes me very clear of what else I could be in denial of. Mm-hmm. And that's where I get scared. That's where, checking in with my sponsor on a daily basis, doing those nightly inventories, and really trying to see my life as it is, not how I want it to be or how I want it to look. It's very important to me. And I'm not, each day is different. But I can tell you that, being sober and learning how to live life without the mask of alcohol was, I remember sitting in a women's meeting, and the girl was talking about going on vacation, a sober vacation. I was just like, inside of me, I thought, how the fuck do you go on vacation being sober? I remember ruining a vacation because I couldn't drink. So I could not imagine. How do you dance? How do you date? How do you do anything being sober? How do you do this? And, that women's group is a 9 o'clock, and I think they still meet over at the Token Club at 9 a.m. That women's group became my support group. And I went through, I heard them share things, and then, and I watched them stay sober, and they gave me some hope. But what happened is I was also able to go to 7:30. It was a Monday morning meeting, and I went to that meeting, and there was a lot of old time sobriety there, and they kind of like were the I don't know, maybe like the older bulls, kind of pushing me, they were standing, they were kind of showing me the ropes. Or, showing us all. And I just remember, I remember I had so much respect for that meeting. And I remember I was about 5 months sober, and that was where I learned the true meaning of the word we. I was at that meeting, and I had dodged a jury duty. I dodged it for years. And I had finally gotten this notice, and they were like, if you don't come do this, you're going to have this kind of fine and this kind of fine and this kind of fine. And I talked to a couple women after that meeting, and I told them, and one of the ladies, her name was Barbie. I love her dearly. She grabbed me and she said, let's go downtown together. And she took me down. She didn't know me from Adam. She took me downtown. And we went in front of whoever it was, and we got the jury thing straightened out. But she taught me at that moment how powerful that we is of the program. She taught me that there's nothing that I have to go through by myself. Right. Nothing. Yep. And I'll never forget that. And, when I have the opportunity, I try to be a part of that we. Because it was so instrumental in my recovery, knowing that I didn't. Number one, I had to figure out that I wasn't alone, and then number two, I could figure out that I didn't have to do it alone. So, I talk about September September 19th of 2005 being my sobriety date, but it was actually October the 26th of 2006 was a pivotal date for me, because I found out that not only did I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, I also suffered from a severe case of dishonesty. And I found that out through Alka-Seltzer Plus. And I was trying to help a friend of mine get sober, which again, I find out why you don't help people get sober. They either do or they don't. You don't help anybody. And it became more important for her to get sober than it was for her. So I had taken a dose of Alka-Seltzer Plus the night before, and I had remembered that I had a cold that night, and I remember it had calmed me down, and I'd gone to sleep. So the next night, the same thing was going on, except I didn't have the cold, but I had that anxious. I wanted to do something for somebody when they didn't want it themselves, and I remember I thought, well, I'm going to take some Alka-Seltzer Plus, and I did. And I called my sponsor at the time, and she said, Lisa, you're going to have to change your sobriety date. And we went back and forth about this for a long time, and I finally came to the realization that for me, this is a program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't a program of Alka-Seltzer Plus Anonymous. But it also made me very clear on, I have a huge problem with dishonesty with myself. So, those kids that, I had, I was incredibly dishonest with them. When I first had that DUI, I didn't even tell them I had a DUI. Told them that I think a squirrel had run in front of the car, and I had a car accident, and, they found out they found out I had a DUI. Their dad found it in the newspaper, and, it was pretty humbling. But it's funny because when we sat down here, we said, I don't want to spend a lot of time in the drunk-a-log. And I feel like I've done that because, the past 13 and a half years, I've finally learned how to live in my own skin.
Yeah.
I've finally learned how to be a part of the human race. And in doing that, I've also learned that everybody else is just doing the very same thing. We're all just trying to learn how to live in our own skin. And, when it was a long time before I finally understood, I think it even talks about it in the big book. I'm not sure, but I believe that the American Medical Society has actually deemed addiction as a mental illness.
Yeah, it's a disease.
It's a disease. And
that's actually, I think the first time if I'm not mistaken, again, this memory works pretty good, so I could be wrong. I think it was 1971 when they actually first diagnosed it as a disease. Now,
really?
The mental illness thing is more of a later, more recent thing of looking at it as a mental illness. And my sponsor will talk about that, that if you were bipolar or schizophrenic or something like that, we're not going, if you would just try harder.
Yes.
Like you said, the control thing, it's a willpower. Why don't you just, act yourself into,
into the right thinking.
You can't ask those people to do that, right? And some of them must be medicated because it's a chemical imbalance.
Yes.
The real cool thing for most of us is this spiritual solution works for us, where we don't have to have some other chemical to rebalance it.
That's exactly right. Because I do believe that a along with the disease of addiction, I believe that most of us suffer. I know I do from a bit of ADD.
Yep.
You know, I believe that I suffer from a bit of bipolar.
Yep.
I believe, I believe that there are certain afflictions that I suffer from. I don't have to take medication for those things, not yet, but I have to be cognizant. Yes, that's exactly right.
Some need both.
That's exactly right. And I think that's where that outside help comes in, and that can be diagnosed properly.
I can kind of get on a horse every once in a while where I want to think that this can do it all, you know.
Yeah.
I can kind of beat an AA drum pretty hard. I come back down to earth fairly quickly too, but I also do have a thing of that. I don't know what we really have until we get this thing, because we look nuts in a whole bunch of different ways when we're still active, right?
Yes.
So really, until we get this thing settled down, you really haven't like come down to some kind of plateau where you can go, okay, yeah, that's what else is going on.
Yes.
It's just the needle is everywhere. The compass needle is spinning so fast they don't know where north, south, east, or west, and the steps will help you settle down to where they can actually give you a proper diagnosis after coming down, you know, after having this spiritual awakening.
Yeah. And it always makes, when you said that, it made me think about, no human power.
Yep.
No human power. And that's very clear to me. No human power. No human power could have done what this has done in my life. No human power whatsoever. And I was, I remember going to AA, and I remember them saying, you got to get a big book. And I thought, what the fuck are they talking about? And meanwhile, I had a big book, didn't know it, but I thought it was this, 40-pound book that I had to carry around. And anyway,
I don't think anybody knows what that is. The first time somebody said something to me about a big book, I instantly thought of the Bible.
Yeah.
I thought that's what they were asking me if
I thought, what in the hell are you talking about? And,
I knew you always talking religion. Daggone it.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that, and I'm so grateful I didn't, because I had a very set. I had walked away from religion.
Yep.
I said, "There's no way," because I knew I was a bad person. I knew in my soul I was a bad person, and I was never going to be good. I was never going to be right. So I wasn't even going to. Fuck it. I'm not even going to try.
You circled around that a little bit a minute ago, and my instinct is to correct that and say, you haven't done anything so bad that it's not repairable. I just don't believe that in my heart. I have done. We've done because of our sickness, and because we were completely powerless. We have done some. Some of us have done some really awful things, but I think there's redemption behind all this stuff. I really do. I don't think there's anything that's so bad that doesn't get wiped clean.
I don't know.
Things.
I
That's
don't
my
know.
belief.
I don't know. I do know that a couple years ago I was given a service opportunity. They were going to shut down one of the local clinics, and it was one of the last local clinics here in Louisville. I won't say what that clinic was for, but I was able to go, and there was a rally to keep that clinic open, and that clinic is still open. And for me, I talked to my sponsor about it, but it was kind of one of those moments where I got to make a little bit
an indirect amends.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah,
very much so.
That sponsor I have talks a lot about indirect amends and ways. A lot of people say I can't make this right, and we say creative. Maybe we have to get creative about how we're going to balance. Because what I feel like I'm doing, and it's not. I've been taught that I'm the best way I can say it is balancing the karmic scales. That's what I'm trying to do again. And some of us have imbalanced more than others, but that's what we're.
It's a very interesting way of putting it.
I think that because. It's well known that we go to our deathbeds, and people will go the things that they can't. All of a sudden, everything that they felt like they couldn't balance, couldn't get right, the people that they couldn't make amends, the things they couldn't make amends for, the relationships they couldn't fix, or make a repair, attempt to repair, all come flooding back on you. And we have these tools here where we can actually do that rebalancing of the scales, so that you can get back on even terms with the universe. Mm-hmm. That's where my higher power more lays, in the world of like this universe, this source energy kind of thing. I'm not a deity kind of, and then again, it doesn't make any difference what yours is. That's I've said. Here's another thing I've learned is that the great thing about this program is that I am encouraged to develop higher power of my own understanding, and then I am not rejected. Even more importantly than that, I'm not rejected for what I choose.
Yeah.
That is like wars and millions of people have died over the fact that they're rejected over what they choose as their higher power. And man, that's just a key that's so big with us that we don't do that. You can sit around in these rooms and have completely different understandings of what a higher power is, and neither one, and for all practical purposes, we have the same one.
That's right.
It's a miracle.
Well, and yes. In fact, I was at a meeting the other day, and it was controversial for me because the meeting was all about God, and I kept thinking, I hope there's not any newcomers in here because that's going to. But
what I look at too, like when I want a Coke, I want a Coke. If I want to hand you a thing of tissues, I call it a Kleenex.
Yeah.
God is no different than calling this thing Kleenex, even though this is generic Kroger brand box of tissues.
Yes.
Yes. That's the way I wrap my.
But that's also a lot of evolution.
Jesus word.
Yes.
I flinch at God still.
Yes, I do too.
I do that, and especially like you said, oh my God, what are they going to do? But a minute ago, we were just having a conversation. We don't have the power to get somebody well, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this God word in here, and this group doesn't have the power to do that.
That's
either.
exactly right.
And
that's
but
the other
I get hung
thing.
Up thinking it.
Yeah, because really the truth is that if somebody doesn't want to be sober, whether the word God or a fly goes across the room, they're not going to stay sober. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But I think that the bigger part of it is just what you had talked about and what I had to come to, and what I believe that that's the ultimate goal is to finally get to the point where I don't have to be in control. I'm not in control. That's the truth. It's powerlessness. It's being completely and totally vulnerable to the universe. Within the realms of my own responsibility of taking care of my job or whatever. But the rest of it, I don't. I have. My sponsor says that all the time. I have control over two things. And that's what I do and what I say. I don't even have control over what I think. We had a conversation the other day because it's become at this portion of my program. I don't know why or how, but it's become. I feel like I'm always a late bloomer because it's become very important to me. The last 3 steps of the program and how they are pivotal to our lives on a daily basis. Because, they're, like you said, I do remember the exercise of making that first, 4th step and making that first 3rd step and doing that first 5th step. I remember those exercises and that first amends. I remember that so clearly. But most things really are living. It's just learning how, and, yes, owning my responsibility. That was a huge thing for me. But growing up as I did, I tend to take on way too much responsibility for things that I don't need to have responsibility for. So I think there's a delicate balance for that, and that's where I have to go to my sponsor. But the last 3 steps are the kind of my daily house cleaning thing. And I said to my sponsor the other day, I have to share this because I just love it, because this is just the way my brain thinks. I still think that I'm the outsider. I still think that, I'm gonna walk across that magical bridge. And I said to her the other day, I said, so when you do your 10th step at night, do you answer no to these questions? Were you angry? Were you, afraid? Did you have resentment? Do you owe amends? And I was thinking, she's going to say, I answer no. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. Because I'm thinking, I can be resentful in the most beautiful place on vacation. That's just the way my brain works, because it's all about me. And she started laughing, and she said, Lisa, I answer yes to pretty much every one of those questions every day. And I was like, oh, thank you. But I think what it helps me to do is I become more cognizant of my behavior. And then, if there needs to be a shift and there needs to be something changed, then obviously,
Yeah. I think it's a constant game of course correction. It's
That's
that old
exactly
thing,
right.
That sailing thing. No
That's
matter
exactly
what, how
right.
straight your keel is and how everything blows, you still end up off course. And the other thing is this is yoga gave me this concept of this being in true north alignment.
Mm-hmm.
My own true north alignment, having my soul in alignment with my spirit and with my higher power, so that, and I will know today I have tools that when I start getting off course, I can bring it back. Because if I get a little bit off course today and I bring it back, I'm okay.
Yes.
But if I get a little bit off course and I go a long ways, then down there I'm way off course.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're just playing this thing and be conscious of that, be aware of it, have tools to correct it, have people around us that will help when we can't see it,
Mm-hmm.
that we get to talk to, and all these things. These are just magnificent principles that allows a guy like me to operate. That design for living that Bill said. That
Yeah.
I got some tools on how. Now, I also, what that does is open up, and I will. This gets a little bit funny, and I won't stall this most of the time. But when I have somebody new in front of me, I'll stall for a second on this. It was one of my sponsors rewritten some of this stuff. And in the 11th step, he says through prayer and meditation and various other things
Mm-hmm.
that we go on to improve our conscious contact, which might be therapy, might be, for me, some yoga, all these, the tools that are out available for us to grow spiritually. Because like it says in the beginning of the book, when it talks about Jim or whoever that failed to enlarge his spiritual life.
Yeah.
The tools that we have at our disposal today, especially like through internet and that, just to get exposed to things, we have an endless supply of tools that will allow us to continue to improve your conscious contact with your higher power today that never was even thought about when that book was written. There weren't even fathomable about what we have at our disposal today, to that tools that allow me to continue to stay in some kind of alignment. It should be, I find it rather easy. I find this program easy to stay on, to stay moving in a direction. Now, I pour a lot of I do a lot of service work. These podcasts is part of it. I consider this as part of my service, part of my participating in my recovery. But I like the way that you were saying that they have that. Probably supposed to answer, yes, I'm angry every day. Because then I start thinking I'm getting cured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I mean, again, my one of my first sponsors, Hazel, I'll just say her name. She was she was the one that helped me to mend the most. She really did. She helped me to heal. And I remember her telling me, she gave me permission to be angry. And I was like, woohoo! Yeah. I get to be angry. I mean, really, really angry.
Yeah. Shut myself in a car and scream and yell and cuss God if I want to. Whatever. Just get it out of your system. You have to feel.
But, I mean, she would say, she'd do that little map, are you mad, you sad, you glad, And, I mean, it was like, she would say, Lisa, babies get angry. And I was like, huh? That's a natural human reaction, Lisa. You can be angry. Yeah. It's what you do with it. It's just like, when you said this really early on, but I think even in I think I read the Daily Reflection this morning, or maybe it was yesterday, but it was talking about substantiated, what is it? What do they call it? Substantiated resentments, or I don't know how you say that. But I mean, people are going to do things to you. People are going to do crazy things. But
you're not going to be free of that. It's
no.
What we have is tools to deal with it today that I never had.
Yes. Same
thing with fear. Same thing with the rest of the stuff.
It's not going to go away.
A friend of mine said, what I'm doing here, I'm not living free from fear. I'm not living free from resentment. What I'm doing is I'm learning to live with them.
That's right.
I'm learning to deal with them because
That's
it's
right.
just a fact of life. Stuff happens.
I remember clearly about 2.5 years ago, I remember having a very clear thought. Maybe it was a little bit longer, but I remember having a very clear thought that I was going to have to get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I remember that so vividly. And I had to make friends with being uncomfortable. And that's for an alcoholic, that's a very weird place to be in.
Yeah, I smile because of some parallels in my life, like when I've just graduated this yoga teacher training thing, and that is something we say when we're posing, when we're holding poses that are difficult.
Yes.
Part of that is learning to be comfortable, finding some comfort in the discomfort, finding some ease in the dis-ease part of it.
Yes.
Finding that, And so this whole thing of like practicing stuff, like it becomes a way bigger thing to me when I'm practicing that, and then life hits me in some way, and I'm like, in some completely different realm on a mat in a pretty sterile atmosphere. I'm practicing finding some comfort when I'm uncomfortable, and when I get into a life position, those things will just instantly, because I've been practicing that, will instantly convert over into this also. That I will be able to find some comfort here, and I'm not, hey, this is just uncomfortableness. This does not mean I have to come unglued. It does not mean I have to do anything rash. I don't have to hurt anybody because of it. I don't have to run. That's my number one conflict avoidance tool, without a doubt, is run.
Oh yeah.
Bolt.
Oh yeah.
Is making it. I still struggle with that.
Oh, yeah.
I struggle with that in relationships. If it gets a little bumpy, man, I'm out of here. I hit the fucking
Exit
button
stage
fast,
left.
man.
Yep.
This
See you
is
later.
not worth it.
Yep.
But I know we use it a lot to pause when agitated. That's great. What I find myself today doing more times than not is when I have to pause when doubtful. It says pause when agitated or doubtful. When I don't know what to do, I have a pause button. And that's what the yoga's given me, and meditation and other things like that have given me this pause button in my life, where I have the ability to stop and not react to these things that happens in life. We were at a home group meeting last night, and some people have shared some really deep stuff, and obviously I'm not going to get into the details of it, but heart-wrenching things, and I've been through some pretty rough stuff that I really haven't shared on the podcast. At least I don't think I have. In sobriety. And I know that the tools work because these guys, this family, you were talking about this women's home group, and these all. I think that's a very powerful thing. I think all women need and all women stuff. I think that is, to me, that's like that's a non-negotiable.
That's right. I'm
not right. My men's home group is that way for me, because those guys in this that net, that safety net that I have underneath of me, if I will let them, that's the key. If I'm willing to let them, they will not let me fall.
That's right.
So when life hit me on life's terms in a way that I was no way that I could have survived this back in the madness, these arms of all these men, when I let them come underneath me and carried me.
Yeah.
And so I have that to be able to testify to that last night when these other guys are going through hard stuff. They go, if you will get in the middle of this circle, here's what I did. Yeah. And it will happen for you too. And, and I see, I can look around in the eyes of people and watch them doing what you're doing. Yeah. And watch how we get to do things that there's no way we really ought to be able to survive it, really. There's not. But we do in this program. We do. We have the arms and a support system and tools that will allow a person to not only maintain, because maintaining sobriety is cool, right? Yes. We maintain our serenity and our sanity.
Yes. Well, we become whole. Yeah. Whole person. I'm not walking around like a shell of myself.
Yeah. Get stripped down.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what, to me, this is recovery's done for me is let me, you said something parallels the same thing. I found my true self here. Mm-hmm. That's what I found here. Mm-hmm. You were saying being comfortable in your skin or something, I think is another way to put it, is to be, is that what I can't remember exactly how you worded it, something like that, how to be comfortable with myself or how to be
comfortable in my own skin. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like I don't feel like, and I think, it's funny because I can look at AA and look at, other parallels in life. And I believe that as a human being, I think we all look for that's pretty much the same things.
We are.
We want acceptance. That the community that you find in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the wonderful part is, what I found in my recovery is, and that's where the traditions really help me with the other groups in my life, so that they can all kind of meld together, because that's really what it teaches me. AA to me is like, everything that I should have learned in kindergarten, I learned in AA. I really did. I started going to my home group is I have 2 home groups. I have the Worms, which is Tuesday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7:45. And I started with that group when it was very beginning, and it was only like 7 people, and I think there was 2 women. And I was taught early on, the women, you guys we have to stick together. They would tell me, the men are going to pat you on the ass, and the women are going to pat you on your back, and you got to stay with the women. And of course, I had to, go through my own. I won't get into that, but obviously, I had to break as many rules. I'm a rule breaker, right, but that
bigger than the rules.
Oh yes, and it's never. My mother would say to me, "Why do you think you're going to be so different, Lisa?" And I would think, "Do you not know me?" Yeah. And I look at people and I call them the normal people. Like, right. She's one of the normal people. She'll rein me back in. She'll be like, "Mom, you don't have to react to this, or stop, and I'll be like, okay, like we were talking about, religion. Religion's been around for bazillion years. People
probably saved civilization at some point.
They've been doing this. They've been doing this thing that I had to learn at 38, which I really didn't learn then. They've been doing this all. But ultimately, the bottom line of what I've learned in this program, yes, there have been a million gifts. One of those gifts is I have so much. My life is so rich. I have so much, and my only goal is to try to give back as much as I possibly can, and sometimes that's like I'm like a helpless puppy, and sometimes I need to stop because some people don't, but I'm grateful for my life today. I'm very clear that night behind the wheel, I was never a suicidal person, but I believe that I could have killed myself. I think it happens every day, and I do very, very firmly believe that if I were to drink again, I'm very clear that maybe that first beer, that might be okay. It might be okay, but I'm very clear on where it would end up. I'm very clear, and I do not want my story to end that way.
Yeah, right.
I don't. So, but I have been taught enough in this program to know that whatever I'm going through, whatever's going on in life, that I have a community, I have a sponsor, I have a higher power more than anything. And if I can just hold on, everything changes. And if I could only say one last thing, the most important lesson that I've learned in this program, I learned from a lady that passed away about 3 months ago from cancer. And she looked at me one day and she said, it's very clear to me, Lisa, that we are not put on this earth for ourselves. And she taught, and this was a woman that used the word Jesus, and I would get around her and I would close my ears because I couldn't stand to hear that word. Yeah. But I grew up with it, and she taught me a powerful, powerful lesson, and because that's what this really is. It's about it's about all of us together.
Yep. One of my very favorite lines in that book is that we have begun to scratch a limitless load. That the only requirement is that we continue to mine it and give the entire.
I think about that. Because I'm not as, and this is probably not a big surprise, but I'm not as vigilant. Like, so I'll go through phases where I'll meditate and I'll read, 86, 87. I'll do my morning meditations, and then I'll go through phases where I'll do it on a consistent basis, and then I won't. And then, and then it'll come back to me, and it's just like mining that gold. Yeah. It's like there's so much of
course correction
benefit.
Too, that you become aware that, hold on, I'm not doing what I don't feel right. What am I not doing that I used to do when I felt better?
Yes.
And then to get back into doing that, you do a mini inventory and say, okay, what am I not doing? And And I also know, I stood in front, because I know my life was, I stood in front of a judge here in New Albany. He told me I was going to prison for 20 years, 5 years ago. And I didn't spend a day in jail. And it was because I started working this stuff, and it was the magic of this. It's unexplainable. There's no real reason that should happen. Now watch other people do it. But also what I also see, because I am vigilant in some areas, I know that my life is so full of blessings today, it's crazy. And it's been gifted to me in some way, and I don't really know the exact dynamic of that. But I also watch how, man, when you turn your back on it, man, the scales tip quickly.
It's wicked.
You watch somebody like, relapse is a part of doing this thing at some point. So I don't want to like drive a nail in the coffin in that direction unnecessarily. But I've witnessed some people, relapse and how fast the rug gets jerked out from underneath of them when that. And that's where I go with that universal karma thing. Mm-hmm. That like when the karma is right, and I'm like, because that's some more yoga stuff. The dharma and the karma. Am I doing the dharma is my duty, my life, my compass needle. What is my path? Mm-hmm. When I stop walking the path, man, you fall off the edge of the cliff quickly. It's a narrow path. Some of the stuff like the biblical stuff really hits home to me today because there's a lot of good lessons there that like the gate is narrow, the path is narrow, and it is. If I get too far off the path, man, I will fall quickly. I will begin to wander off path and have trouble getting. And the further off that path I get, the harder it is to come back to it. I owe a certain, there's an accountability here for my personal level that I owe to AA to continue to practice this stuff.
That's right.
And stand and to continue to give it away and be in a position that I'm standing around doing, especially like, and there's a dynamic here with this podcast that I'm upping my insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I'm standing here talking a lot of talk, right?
Yes.
And in the same vein, I know that I need to be walking the walk also.
Yes.
And it's not like a tit for tat kind of thing.
No.
That's not what it is at all.
No, but it's like looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, because like right now,
it holds me accountable.
That's right. I remember somebody. I love him. He's in my home group, but he used to say, nobody drives down the road in a straight line. And I love that, because it's the truth. We all kind of go in between the, yes. Yep. Yes. And somebody else, they said, my mind is like, it's like a boat that's, when I go to bed at night, I'm shored up, I'm locked down, I'm tied to the pier. And then through the night, my line gets loose and I go, I can go. And that's what I think about when I think about relapse. Because it's just that slow, gradual. It's like my dad used to say about insanity. You never know you're insane because it's just, you kind of just slip under. Yeah. And I totally believe that. It's like one day without going, to a meeting. I've done that. I've gone 2 weeks without going to a meeting. And my kids will, at first they were like, when are you going to be home, Mom? And then they were like, when are you going to go to a meeting? Yeah. It was like, you got to get, because that was the one place I knew especially early on, that I could find some relief. And even now, I know I can always find relief in service work. I know I can.
Yep.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but I know that it's there.
Like I said, those principles of, we say we do this, and I really don't know anybody, to be honest. And I can say this with like 100% certainty today, in a way, that if you work these steps, you'll get a sponsor, work these steps, and practice these principles, really do them, you don't relapse. It's 100% guaranteed. Mm-hmm. Where you stop doing things is where you end up slipping back and going back. If you actually put these things, I don't think, there's a whole bunch of little things like this is not a program of some get it and some don't. It's a program of some do and some don't. Mm-hmm. This is doing these things, putting action behind them. You sit down, and I've said this before on here, and I begin to think I'm like repeat myself, but this is pretty simple, really, at some level. Mm-hmm. It could be as complicated as you want.
It is.
But if you sit around and talk to somebody that is not happy with their program, that is struggling in some place, if I can interview them for a few minutes, I will generally find out what they're not doing. That's usually where it's at. They're not meditating. They're not praying. They're not 12-stepping. They're not doing service work. They're not doing a nightly inventory. It's been a long time since they've been through the steps. I believe the steps are a thing we go through multiple times over our lifetime. I don't think it's a one and done thing. I think that's when it says continue. And that's what that means. So I think it's pretty simple to look at it like that. But doggone if it ain't easy to put the tools down.
Oh yeah. Because life happens.
Yep.
I got married 4 years ago. Talk about working a program or not working a program. Being married in the program and with to another alcoholic. A
sober alcoholic.
He's very sober, and it's very.
Just wanted to make sure that got clarified there.
Oh yeah, it's very it's alive and well. And I mean
So that's a
the
miracle.
principles.
I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've listened to my thing here. I'm big on this. Like, I know we do gratitude lists and things, but I was also taught early on to do this miracle list.
Oh yes.
And I
there's
write them down
so
today,
many.
and I actually have the list. I have a list of them, and I always like to make sure that we talk about at least a few of them. Wow, before the person gets out of here on the podcast, and just was curious maybe if you could think anything come to mind on that you could maybe talk about in that department.
Yes. Well, I could always talk about that. I mean, my life is so full. I ended up. I mean, I don't even know where to start with the gratitude. I can tell you that I ended up leaving the bartending business, and I've been in transportation for the past 10 years, and I work for a very small company, and they're very good to me. And I have a wonderful skill set that I would have never been able to pay for in college. I am responsible today. I can show up for work, and I can be responsible, and I can be emotionally responsible. That's a big one for me. But I mean, I have a relationship with my children, which is very precious to me.
Absolutely.
Because I believe that they're the future.
Relationships restored, especially those really close ones. I mean, that is one of the huge big miracles that happens in this, and we hear it, a lot when you're with a new guy about the damage they've done, or new gal about they don't think it can be repaired, right? And, and families are restored, reassembled, as the book says.
Yes, and stopping the cycles. I mean, talking about this. I was talking to that young lady that I told you that went to college, that's going to college right now, and she said she was doing a piece on addiction, and somebody came up to her and she said, my sister died from heroin overdose because she could never be honest. She could never. She was so because of the stigma around addiction, and that's, I guess, if I could say anything, I don't care about saying my last name. I don't care. I introduce
myself as my first and last name when I'm in meetings, and I do it no matter
I do
what
too, and I don't care. But that my sponsor used to say to me, she would say, Lisa, there's a thing about being too anonymous, because people will come in and they'll introduce themselves as a pet name, and if that pet name goes to the hospital, how are you going to find them?
There's a favorite speaker of mine that talks about that same thing, and he says he goes to the hospital and he says, yes, I'm here to see Janet from another planet. Dr. Dr. Bob says in his book, in that the Good Old Timers, is that what it's called? That not saying withholding your last name in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is as much of an anonymity break as going press radio and stuff, because we must begin to know each other. We need to know each other.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have a quote. I have a whole lot of those quotes. It's actually he so I can, like, when I get a little bit of like prove it. That memory thing works really well. When it doesn't, I actually have a ton of notes in here to help remind myself. And you can find it. You can Google it and find it. He said we should be saying our last names in meetings.
Yeah, that's just for me.
Right, yeah.
But
I said that, so I'm allowed to break my own.
Yes,
I can't do yours.
That's right. And I mean, I don't care. I don't care who knows. I told my bosses early on. Of course, I've learned over the years that you don't tell everybody. But I also have another thing. I used to, when I would drink so much, my very favorite thing would be to throw up so I could drink more. And nowadays, one of my favorite things is when I go to the bathroom, I usually try to pray before I leave the bathroom. And I'm always, praying on my knees. And I laugh about it now, because I would think, I wonder if somebody thinks I'm throwing up. And now, of course, I just don't care. It's like, it's funny though, because it's like praying in a new place, Like, I don't know. I firmly believe in the power of prayer.
Me too. I watch outcomes change.
Yes.
I've watched outcomes change, and you can't tell me any different.
I believe that with 100%. And that started, like I said, that started with my home group, watching their lives change. I got to physically sit up front and have a front row seat of how it happened. And I witness it every day.
Yeah, we've got a little group that we do, and we've got these groups on the internet that we stay in contact. This home group of guys I'm talking about stay in contact. Probably a little, some people might think it might be too much contact. But a guy's wife had, he sent out the alarm that his wife was having a seizure, and she was in really bad shape, and she was like, and she had been surviving cancer, she'd been getting chemo, she'd been having some pretty heavy duty stuff, and she has a seizure at home, and he's calling 911 at the same time while he's waiting. He's asking us, and we're praying for her.
Wow.
And we send out the prayer chain, and I will cry talking about this. We send out the prayer chain to 40 or 50 dudes, man, and they're all praying for him, and they get to the hospital and they get her in there and they can't find nothing's wrong with her. And he comes back with his text and says, man, I think I overreacted. And I said, no, man, I think 50 guys, real powerful prayer changed the freaking outcome, brother. Yeah. And I believe that.
Yeah. I do too.
We do too. Spiritual warriors, I
believe that there's something else. Yeah. I do. A good friend of mine, and he's very clear on being atheist. He's very clear on it, and he's written several books. And I so appreciate him because that opens up the door for so much.
Yep. I got a really close friend, similar kind of thing. Although he hasn't written any books, but he just has a completely different angle on this.
But it's the same stuff.
And it's taught me, it's helped me open my mind to some things. And I think it's, there's a thing at some place about iron sharpens iron kind of thing, where when we rub together like that, if we do it in a positive manner, we sharpen each other. And I think that's what happens when we allow ourselves to not reject this. That gets back to that. I'm not going to reject you for the higher power, whatever it is, because there's always something, right? There's something people are leaning on.
Yes.
Even though they won't put the labels of atheists, and the same thing with all those labels of different denominations and things. It's these human words, the sounds we make when we grunt, don't really adequately describe this stuff. So we are at an hour and 50 minutes. Can you believe that?
Wow. I bet she can believe that.
Did you? So you've been doing school work?
Oh, no, it's for a job.
For a job? For an application? Yeah, we're talking to the phantom person in the room. They're not really in there.
She's the wind beneath my wings.
Yeah.
She's everything that I ever wanted to be.
So we got a couple more minutes, and I like to stay under that 2 hours. There's another thing about the 2 hour mark. I told my sponsor this when he was here the other day. It also that the actual file size gets beyond. Once it gets to a certain size, I start having to decrease the quality to get it loaded out. The place that I do has a limit on how big the file can be. It's not a big deal, but I need that limit in my life. I need the guardrails.
Yeah.
If I've got any guardrails, no any lines on the road. So this is that's a little metaphor to me. That's like, okay, I got these lines. So tell me one more. Give me a miracle. Give me something that you can.
I have my father in my life. My father was. He's. I mean, and that's because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that would have never been true because I was taught that he didn't want to be a part of my family, of me. He didn't want me in his family, and I think when I was 21 or 22, I even told him to go fuck off, and I was 4 or 5 years sober, and my sponsors at the time said, Lisa, I think you need to heal. This needs to heal. And she encouraged me to go. And my daughter was with me at the time. We were doing a 5th step. And my daughter went downstairs to the computer at my sponsor's house. And she pulled up my father's name on the computer and found his telephone number in Lexington. She said, is it this? And there was 2 of them, and I said, I don't know. And I called the next day. I called the very first number, and it was him. Wow! And he started crying. He said, "I've been waiting for this phone call for 15 or 20 years."
That is juice.
And he's a powerful. He's not one of us. But I can definitely tell that I am his daughter, and he's a powerful force in my life.
That is super cool. Yeah. The power of this program has no limits. It really doesn't. I try to carry that message the best I can as I'm walking around, and that's part of why I do these podcasts, so that these, you get to hear these circuit speakers, and I'm a big speaker tape guy, and there's a lot of great stuff out there too. But we've got everyday heroes kind of things walking around, as lives have been saved as a result of this program. And I don't know, one day it was I just got led to doing this little podcast here. I'm pretty happy about that. We just went. I was just launched at the beginning of this year, and we crossed over 2,000 listens the other day, which to me
that's pretty amazing.
That seems pretty good to me. And when I look at it as a startup, no real help. And it's getting around. Like I have a Facebook page that supports it. So, let's just go there. First off, I really, really appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you.
I get excited and Robin helping me get new guests and get people I don't know, because it's pretty cool when I sit across the table, because sometimes I sit across the table with somebody I know that I just haven't heard their story, and I know them pretty well, but I haven't heard it. But there's something cool. I get this whole well-rounded thing where I get these people that I've just met, because we just met today. Although you told me something a little bit earlier, and I remember when in 2011 to time frame 2011 2012, I'm almost certain I worked in DuPont Circle, and it was the first time I made a run at getting sober, and I was coming over to the Worms meetings on a regular basis. I was coming over from that 7 to 7:45 or whatever, and I could get to work by 8.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure I remember you from those meetings. So back to that, I just get to know people sitting here like this, and that's this same thing. That opposite of addiction is connection. That's beginning to build my safety net deeper and deeper, strand by strand, spider web by spider web, out to every corner that I can possibly get a web attached to. I have been working on doing that, and this podcast lets me do that, and the guests that the people that people bring in too, and it's just it's been just a huge blessing. So we have a Facebook page called Spiritual Underground. You can find that. You can find the podcast on it, where there's links to these and some other things. Spiritualunderground.org is a website that supports this podcast. You can see pictures and show notes and contact me if you want to talk to me, or if you want to if you want to be on the podcast, or any way you think I might be able to help. Music around this thing is by Darren Frank, and go out to Amazon and get Christopher Cohn's new book, 12-Step Spiritual Recovery. Bring in these 12 steps. I joke around, and we've said for as long as I've been here, we've heard this phrase that said, I wish everybody had these steps in their life. But this, for the first time, I've seen somebody actually taking some action to try to do that, to try to look at this spiritual malady in a way that it's not necessarily, did you have to drink or anything else, because we know that
addiction-based, yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have got a behavior or an addiction to be able to use the 12 steps to better your life.
That's right.
And the other thing I say to people is, do you have any room, and I got this from my sponsor, do you have any room for better? Could your life be any better? And I don't think there's anybody that could answer that question, no. I mean, everybody has some room for better, right? And we say better with a capital B. So, if I could promise you 5 to 10% better, would you take it? Well, I would hope you would, Otherwise, you're settling for less than what this universe has to offer you. So that's what we're trying to get out with that 12-step spiritual recovery thing, is to try and make this thing available to more people, more humans. It's another way I get to practice these principles. It's another way I get to participate in my recovery.
There you go.
And it opened up a whole new pool of sponsees too. And these aren't quite, I got it in my head that maybe they're not quite as crazy as alcoholic newcomers. I really have a heart for that alcoholic newcomer and doing that, though, man. Watching somebody bloom and come to life is a huge blessing. I mean, it's just unreal. Well, again, thank you very much. I love having you in here today, and I love your glow. I love your energy. That's it's fun to see. You get to really, I don't know, I feel like I feel people when I'm sitting there, like there's a heart connection. Something happens. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for all those listens out there. Share this thing. Get the word out, and let's keep seeing what we can do to help make this Big Blue Marble just a little bit better than it was yesterday. Peace out.
Well, I never met anyone like you. Tender heart and eyes burning blue. And I don't know how you do the things you do. I just know that, baby, you're alright. Baby, you're alright with me. My soul's never been this free. Blue skies as far as I see. 'Cause baby, you're alright. Your touch brings a peace of mind. Never knew that I've been so blind. Love opened up my heart to find. Baby, you're alright. alright.